"Mom, what are you doing here? Please don't make a scene. That's your wedding ring. It's just a ring, sweetheart. You said you'd never take it off." I never stopped loving him, but love doesn't pay the electric bill. Elena Marquez came home rich, exhausted, and ready to hold the only woman who had ever believed in her before the world did. But before her rental car reached the little yellow house on Magnolia Street, she made one small detour, a stop at a pawn shop off Route 9 in Sacramento, because her flight had landed early and she wanted to buy a silver bracelet she remembered seeing in the window as a teenager. That was where she saw her. An elderly woman in a threadbare cardigan, standing at the counter, hands trembling as she slid a thin gold band across the glass. Elena stared once, then again. Her chest went cold. The woman pawning her wedding ring under the fluorescent lights was her mother. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional dramas and shocking twists that stay with you long after the video ends, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another story like this one. And before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. Now let's return to the pawn shop, the moment Elena's carefully built world began to crack open. 12 hours earlier, Elena had stepped off the plane at Sacramento International believing she was coming home to celebration. The California air felt dry and unfamiliar after 7 years in Zurich. She was 36 now, tall, sharp-eyed, dressed in a charcoal coat that had cost more than her mother's monthly rent used to be. She carried one leather suitcase and the quiet confidence of a woman who had built herself from double shifts, borrowed textbooks, and too many missed birthdays. Her driver, a soft-spoken man named Miguel, took her bag and opened the door to a black sedan waiting at the curb. "Home, Miss Marquez," Elena almost smiled. "Not yet. There's a place I want to stop first." She had not told anyone she was coming. Not Daniel, her fiancé back in Zurich, not her assistant. Not even her older brother Marco. Especially not Marco. She wanted to see her mother's face when she walked through the front door. She had imagined it for months, her mother in the kitchen humming along to some old Spanish ballad on the radio, the smell of coffee and cinnamon in the air. Elena would knock. Her mother would open the door and cry the way she always cried when she was happy, hands pressed to her mouth like she was trying to hold the joy inside. For 7 years, Elena had told herself she was doing right by her family. Every month she wired money home, the mortgage on the yellow house, groceries, her mother's diabetes medication, extra for comfort, for small pleasures, for the little birthday cakes her mother loved from the panaderia on 6th Street. Marco handled everything from Sacramento. Marco was reliable, organized, the responsible one, or so Elena had always believed. He knew the accounts, the paperwork, the appointments. He had told Elena again and again that their mother, Rosa, was fine. "You know how Mom is," he would say during their monthly calls. "She's stubborn. She doesn't want to worry you. Just keep sending the money and let me handle the rest." And Elena had believed him because she wanted to, because believing meant she could keep working, keep climbing, keep building the life she had promised her mother she would build for both of them. The sedan moved through Sacramento in pieces. Glass office towers gave way to older neighborhoods, then to strip malls with faded signs and taquerias tucked between check-cashing stores. Elena watched it all pass by with a strange mix of pride and disorientation. She had left this city with $300 and a scholarship letter. She was returning with a portfolio worth more than the entire block she grew up on. At a stoplight near the corner of Route 9, she spotted the little pawn shop with the neon sign in the window, Cash Corner. The place had been there since she was in high school. Miguel eased the car toward the curb. "Just 5 minutes," Elena said, stepping out into the warm September air, having no idea that the next 5 minutes would tear the ground out from under her feet. The bell above the pawn shop door chimed softly as Elena stepped inside. The air smelled of old leather, cigarette smoke, and something faintly metallic, the way places that traded in desperation always seemed to smell. Glass cases lined the walls, filled with guitars, watches, camcorders from another decade, wedding rings stacked in neat rows like small tombstones. A ceiling fan turned slowly overhead. Behind the counter, A man in his 50s with a graying goatee looked up from a small notebook. He gave Alina a polite nod, then returned his attention to the customer already standing at the counter, an elderly woman in a faded blue cardigan, her silver hair pulled back in a loose bun. Alina barely glanced at her at first. She drifted toward the display window, searching for the bracelet she remembered. She had been 16 the last time she stood in the shop. Her mother had brought her here to look at the jewelry that Christmas because they could not afford the department store downtown. Rosa had pointed to a delicate silver bracelet in the case and whispered, "Someday, Mija, someday you'll have all the pretty things." Alina had promised herself she would come back and buy that bracelet with her own money one day. That was the promise that had brought her here, the small superstition she carried like a good luck charm. She scanned the case. The bracelet was gone, or maybe it had never been the same one. Her eyes drifted back toward the counter, and that was when she heard the voice. Soft, tired, embarrassed. "Are you sure that's all you can give me for it?" Alina froze. The voice was one she had heard for 36 years. The voice that had sung her to sleep, scolded her for coming home late, prayed over her the night before she left for Switzerland. She turned slowly. The elderly woman at the counter had her back to Alina. Her shoulders were narrow inside the cardigan. Her hands, small and worn, rested on the glass. Between her fingers sat a thin gold band. Alina's chest tightened. She knew that ring. She had known it her whole life. Her mother had worn it every single day since Alina was born. Even after Alina's father died when she was 11, Rosa had refused to take it off. "This ring is your father," she used to say. "As long as I wear it, he's still with me." Alina's legs felt distant, as if they belonged to someone else. She took one step forward, then another. The man behind the counter examined the ring under a small magnifying glass. He shook his head slowly. "It's real gold, ma'am, but it's thin. 14 karat. Best I can do is $45. Rosa nodded quickly, the way people nodded when they were trying not to cry. That's fine, I'll take it." Alina's throat closed. $45 for the ring her mother had worn for over 40 years. "Mom," the word came out barely above a whisper. Rosa's whole body stiffened. She did not turn around. She did not move. She simply closed her eyes, as though if she stayed perfectly still, the moment might undo itself. Alina stepped closer. "Mom, please look at me." Slowly, painfully, Rosa turned. Her eyes were already glistening. She looked older than Alina remembered, not just 7 years older, but decades. Her cheeks were hollow, her skin thin as paper. There was a bruise on her wrist, small and yellow, the kind that came from bumping into furniture in a dark hallway when the electricity had been cut off. Alina saw it, and something inside her cracked open. "Alina," Rosa whispered, "you weren't supposed to see this." The pawnbroker looked between them, sensing the shift in the room. He quietly slid the ring back across the counter toward Rosa. "Take your time," he said gently, and stepped into the back office to give them privacy. Alina stared at her mother, at the ring, at the cardigan she was certain she had bought Rosa herself 6 years ago. It had been new then. Now the sleeves were fraying, and there was a small stain near the collar that no amount of washing had lifted. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Rosa's hand trembled as she picked up the ring. "Please, Mija, please don't make a scene. That is your wedding ring. It's just a ring, sweetheart. You said you would never take it off. You said Dad was still in it." Rosa's tears finally spilled over. "I never stopped loving him," she whispered. "But love doesn't pay the electric bill." For a long moment, Alina could not speak. The words her mother had just said kept looping through her mind. Love doesn't pay the electric bill. Behind the counter, the ceiling fan clicked softly with each rotation. Somewhere in the back office, a radio played a Spanish-language commercial for a used car lot. The ordinariness of it all made everything feel worse, because tragedy was supposed to announce itself, and instead it had simply walked into a pawn shop on a Tuesday afternoon wearing a faded blue cardigan. Alina reached out and gently closed her mother's fingers around the ring. "Put it away, Mom. You're not selling this." Rosa shook her head quickly. "You don't understand. I owe the pharmacy. I owe the water company. Mrs. Alvarez down the street let me borrow $40 last month, and I haven't been able to pay her back, and I can't keep looking her in the eye." "Mom, stop." The insulin is more than I can, Alina, please, just let me do this. It's just a ring. It's not just a ring. Alina's voice broke on the last word. She pressed her mother's hand between both of hers. Rosa's skin felt papery and cold. It's not just a ring. It's Dad. It's the story you told me every night when I was scared of the dark. It's the reason I believed people could love each other forever. Rosa closed her eyes. A single tear slid down her cheek and disappeared into the collar of her cardigan. I sent money every month, Alina whispered. Every single month for 7 years. Marco told me you were fine. He said the mortgage was paid. He said your medication was covered. He said you were eating well and going to church and playing bingo on Thursdays with your friends. At the mention of Marco's name, Rosa flinched. It was small, almost invisible, but Alina caught it. She had spent her entire career reading rooms, reading investors, reading the tiny shifts in people's faces when they were hiding something. She knew that flinch. It was the same flinch Rosa used to make when Alina's father came home late smelling of another woman's perfume, back when Alina was too young to understand what she was seeing. Mom. Alina's voice was steadier now, quieter, the way a person's voice becomes when they realize they are standing at the edge of something they cannot unknow. Where is the money going? Rosa did not answer. She looked down at the counter, at the ring in her palm, at anything but her daughter's face. Mom, look at me. Rosa's shoulders began to shake, not dramatically, just the small, contained shaking of a woman who had learned a long time ago how to cry without making noise. Alina had seen that kind of crying before. She had grown up watching it. Her mother had cried like that at her father's funeral. She had cried like that the day Alina left for Zurich. She had cried like that every time life had asked her to swallow something too big for a person to carry alone. Alina took a breath. She turned toward the back office. Sir. The pawnbroker stepped out, wiping his hands on a small rag. Alina reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her wallet. She placed 3 crisp $100 bills on the counter. For your time and for your discretion. My mother is leaving with her ring. She won't be coming back. The pawnbroker looked at the money, then at Rosa, then at Alina. He nodded slowly and pushed 2 of the bills back across the glass. One's enough. You keep the rest, ma'am, and I'm sorry. He said the last part directly to Rosa. Then he stepped back and gave them the room again. Alina slipped the ring onto her mother's finger herself. Rosa's hand shook so badly that Alina had to steady it with her own. The gold band slid into place over the pale groove worn into Rosa's skin from 40 years of wearing it. The groove looked like a scar now, a soft indentation that would never fully disappear. It stays on, Alina said. Do you understand me? It stays on. Rosa nodded silently and pressed her palm against her chest, over her heart, the way she used to when Alina was a little girl and needed comforting. Only now it was Rosa who needed the comforting, and Alina who was learning, for the first time, how to give it. Outside the pawn shop, Miguel was still waiting by the sedan. He straightened when he saw them. Miguel opened the back door without a word. He was a man who had driven executives and grieving families and celebrities and heartbroken parents for over 20 years, and he knew, the way experienced drivers always knew, when to disappear into the background. He simply held the door and looked politely at the sidewalk while Alina helped her mother into the leather seat. Rosa moved slowly, one hand still pressed to her chest, the other clutching the strap of a small vinyl purse that Alina remembered from her childhood. The same purse, still, after all these years. Alina slid in beside her and closed the door. The interior of the sedan smelled like new leather and mint, a clean, quiet, expensive smell that felt obscene against the frayed cuffs of her mother's cardigan. Miguel eased the car into traffic. Where to, Miss Marquez? Alina opened her mouth, then closed it. Home was the only word she had prepared for this trip. Home to the yellow house on Magnolia Street. Home to the kitchen with the yellow curtains and the little ceramic rooster on the windowsill. But she did not know now whether that home even existed anymore. Mom. Rosa did not answer. She was staring out the window at the passing storefronts. Her eyes were dry now, but her face had the blank, exhausted stillness of a person who had spent all her tears months ago and was operating on something less than tears now. Mom, where do you live? A long silence. Then very softly, Magnolia Street. Alina felt something loosen slightly in her chest. The house is still there. Rosa nodded once. The house is still there. Then take us there, Alina said to Miguel. 138 Magnolia off Franklin Boulevard. The car turned east. Rosa kept her face turned toward the window. Alina watched her mother's profile in the afternoon light, cataloging every small change. The way her hair, which used to be black and thick, was now thin and completely silver. The way her jaw had softened. The way her hands, which had spent 40 years cleaning other people's houses to put food on the table, now trembled almost constantly, a fine involuntary tremor Alina did not remember from before. Parkinson's, low blood sugar, fear. Alina did not know. She realized with a slow, sinking horror that she did not know anything about her mother's current health. She had wired money for medication for 7 years and had no idea what condition her mother was actually in. When did you last see a doctor? Alina asked quietly. Rosa did not turn from the window. I go to the free clinic on Broadway. The free clinic, the one at the Methodist church. They have volunteer doctors on Wednesdays. Alina felt the sedan tilt slightly beneath her, or maybe it was just her own equilibrium giving way. Mom, I've been sending money for your doctor. For your medications, for your insurance. Rosa turned her head slowly. Her eyes were tired but clear. What money, Mija? 3 words. 3 words, and Alina's entire understanding of the last 7 years began to collapse. She sat very still. She could feel her heartbeat in her fingertips. She thought of Marco, of his voice on the phone every month, calm and reassuring. Mom's fine, Alina. Mom's tired, but she's fine. Don't fly home for Christmas. She's already got plans with her church group. Don't fly home for her birthday. She doesn't want the fuss. 7 years of small excuses that had added up to something Alina could not yet name. Mom. Alina's voice came out steadier than she expected. I need you to tell me everything, from the beginning. When did the money stop coming? Rosa looked down at her hands, at the ring back on her finger, at the small yellow bruise on her wrist. I don't want to make trouble for your brother. Mom. He tries, Alina. He tries in his own way. Mom, please, when? A long silence. Then Rosa exhaled softly, the way a person exhales when they have been holding something in for so long that letting it out feels almost like relief. It stopped coming to me about 5 years ago. Alina stared at her. 5 years. Rosa nodded. At first there was a little every month, $100 for groceries, $50 for the electric, then it got smaller, then it stopped altogether. But the mortgage, Rosa gave a tiny, humorless smile. The mortgage was paid off 6 years ago, Mija. Your father's life insurance covered the last of it. The house was mine free and clear before you ever left for Switzerland. Alina felt the air leave her lungs. 6 years. The house had been paid off for 6 years. She had wired $2,200 every month to Marco's account, marked mortgage, for 6 years. She did the math automatically, the way her mind did numbers now without permission. Somewhere over $150,000 just for the mortgage, and the mortgage had never existed. Mom. Her voice was very quiet. How have you been paying for things? Rosa shrugged, a small helpless gesture. I clean houses still. 2 mornings a week. Mrs. Chen on Elm Street, the Peterson family off Riverside. It's not much. And Mrs. Alvarez next door helps me. She brings me soup sometimes. Father Ramon at the church, he lets me take home the extra food from the Sunday breakfasts. You clean houses. Yes. You're 71 years old and you clean houses. I'm 71 years old and I have to eat, Mija. Alina turned her face away toward her own window. She did not want her mother to see the expression on her face because she did not know yet what the expression was. It was not sadness. Sadness was too small a word for it. It was something colder, something that felt like a room emptying out. Miguel drove on. The neighborhoods shifted, older houses with sagging porches, chain-link fences, oak trees whose roots had cracked the sidewalks decades ago and never been repaired. Alina remembered these streets. She had walked them home from school every day for 12 years, her backpack heavy with library books, her mother waiting on the porch with a glass of lemonade every summer afternoon. The sedan turned onto Magnolia. Alina's breath caught. The yellow house was still there. The same little bungalow with the wide front porch and the two skinny palm trees her father had planted the year Alina was born. But the yellow paint was faded now, peeling in long strips near the eaves. The porch railing was missing two of its spindles. The screen door hung slightly crooked on its hinges. One of the palm trees had died and had not been replaced. The lawn was mostly dust. A hand-painted sign in the front yard read "For sale by owner" with a phone number underneath in fading black marker. Alina stared at the sign. "Mom," Rosa did not look at her. "It's been up for 4 months. Nobody's called. The house needs too much work." "Whose phone number is that?" Rosa hesitated. "Your brother's." Alina closed her eyes. She counted to 10 in her head, the way her therapist in Zurich had taught her to do when she felt anger rising in her chest during high-stakes negotiations. It did not work this time. It did not even come close to working. "Marco is trying to sell your house. He says it's too much for me to keep up. He says I should move into a senior apartment. He says the money from the sale would take care of me for the rest of my life." "And where would that money go, Mom?" Rosa was silent. Alina opened her eyes. "Where would that money go? He would help me manage it. Just like he helped you manage the money I've been sending for 7 years. Rosa's chin trembled. She did not answer. Miguel pulled the sedan to the curb in front of the house. He turned off the engine and sat quietly, waiting for instructions. Alina reached over and took her mother's hand. It was cold and small in hers. "Mom, I'm going to ask you one more question, and I need you to tell me the truth. Are you afraid of Marco?" Rosa's eyes filled again, but she did not cry. She just looked down at their joined hands. "He's my son, Alina." "That's not what I asked." A long pause. Then in a voice so quiet Alina almost missed it sometimes. One word. That one word contained everything. The bruise on her wrist. The pawn shop. The 5 years of silence. The for sale sign in the yard. The $45 for a wedding ring worth 1,000 times more in memory than in gold. Alina squeezed her mother's hand very gently and got out of the car. She walked around to Rosa's side, opened the door, and helped her mother stand. The porch steps creaked under their feet the way they always had. The third step down had been loose since Alina was 14. Her father had promised to fix it the summer before he died and never got the chance. 25 years later it was still loose. The door was unlocked. Alina pushed it open and stepped inside. The smell hit her first. Not the smell she remembered, the cinnamon and coffee and old book smell of her childhood. This smell was thinner, emptier. A faint mustiness, the kind that settled into houses where no one had run the heater in a long time, mixed with something sharper underneath. Something like mildew from a leak that had not been repaired. She looked around the living room. Most of the furniture was gone. The big brown couch where she used to do her homework was missing. The wooden coffee table her father had built the year they moved in was gone. The bookshelves along the far wall stood empty except for a few paperback novels and a family Bible. Where the television used to be, there was only a rectangle of unfaded paint on the wall. In the corner, a single armchair sat facing a small folding card table with a portable radio on it. A folded blanket lay across the arm of the chair. Alina understood immediately. Her mother had been living in this one corner of the room. Everything else had been sold. She turned to look at Rosa. Her mother was standing in the doorway with her hands folded in front of her, the way she used to stand in other people's houses when she cleaned them. As though she were a guest in her own home, waiting for permission. "Mom," Alina's voice caught. "Sit down." She guided Rosa to the armchair and knelt in front of her. She had not knelt in front of her mother since she was a little girl playing at Rosa's feet while her mother mended clothes at the kitchen table. Her expensive charcoal coat pooled on the dusty hardwood floor. She did not care. Where did the furniture go? Rosa's eyes moved slowly around the room as though she were still cataloging its absences herself. "Marco said the couch was too big for me. He said the coffee table was in the way. He said I would trip on it. He took them to his apartment. And the television, he sold it. He said I watched too much news, that it upset me. And the bookshelves, those he sold at a yard sale last summer." Alina drew a slow breath. "Mom, what did he do with the money?" Rosa shook her head slowly. "I don't ask him about money anymore. It makes him angry when I ask." Alina stood up. Her knees ached from kneeling on the hardwood. She walked slowly through the house, her heels clicking sharply in the empty rooms. The kitchen was next. The ceramic rooster was still on the windowsill. The yellow curtains were still there, faded almost white by the sun. The refrigerator hummed weakly. Alina opened it. A half-empty carton of milk. A single tomato. A tortilla wrapped in foil. A small plastic container of what looked like beans. That was all. She opened the cabinet above the sink. 2 cans of soup, a bag of rice, a jar of instant coffee. That was all. She closed the cabinet very carefully so that it would not slam. In the bedroom, her mother's bed was still there, at least, though the good mattress had been replaced with something thinner. The dresser her father had refinished as a wedding gift to Rosa was gone. In its place stood a small plastic drawer unit from a discount store. On top of it sat a framed photograph. Alina picked it up. It was a picture of her, Alina, at her graduation from the Wharton Executive Program. She was standing between 2 men she barely remembered, colleagues she had lost touch with years ago. She was smiling. She looked healthy, confident, successful. Behind her, out of focus, was the Zurich skyline. Alina did not remember sending this photograph to her mother. She stared at it for a long time. Then she turned it over. On the back, in her mother's careful handwriting, were 4 words: my daughter, my reason. Alina set the photograph down very gently on the plastic drawers. She walked out of the bedroom, through the empty living room, past her mother in the chair and out onto the front porch. She stood at the porch railing, gripped it hard with both hands, and finally allowed herself to cry. She did not cry the way she had cried as a teenager, loud and messy and full of protest. She cried the way her mother cried, silently, shoulders shaking, tears sliding down her face without permission. She cried for the wedding ring on the pawn shop counter. She cried for the empty refrigerator. She cried for the photograph on the plastic drawers and the 4 words on the back of it. She cried for every phone call over the last 7 years in which Marco had said she's fine, she's fine, she's fine. And she had chosen to believe him because believing was easier than flying home. She cried, most of all, for the fact that her mother had spent 5 years afraid of her own son and had never once picked up the phone to say so, because she had not wanted to interrupt her daughter's life. After a long time, she wiped her face with the back of her hand and pulled out her phone. She did not call Marco. Not yet. First, she called the utility company. She paid the outstanding balance and had the gas and electricity confirmed active. Then she called a grocery delivery service and ordered enough food for 2 weeks. Real food, fresh vegetables, chicken, milk, coffee, cinnamon rolls from the Panaderia on 6th Street. Then she called a locksmith and scheduled a same-day change of the front and back door locks. Then, and only then, did she call her attorney in San Francisco, a woman named Priya Anand who had handled Alina's business affairs for the last 3 years. Priya answered on the second ring. Alina spoke quietly and clearly for about 11 minutes. When she was done, Priya said only one thing: "I'll be there tomorrow morning by 9. Alina hung up and went back inside. Rosa was still in the armchair, watching her with worried eyes. "Who were you calling, Mija? The people who are going to help us fix this." "Alina, please, don't do anything that will upset your brother." Alina knelt again in front of the chair. She took both of her mother's hands in hers. "Mom, listen to me. For 7 years you have been protecting Marco. You have been protecting his reputation and his pride and his temper and his lies. You have done that because you are his mother and because that is what mothers do. I understand that, but I am your daughter and it is my turn to protect you now. Do you understand?" Rosa's chin trembled. "He's my son, Alina. He's my brother and I love him and I am still going to protect you from him. Those 2 things can both be true." Rosa looked at her for a long moment. Then very slowly she nodded. It was a small nod, but it was the first thing Rosa had agreed to since Alina had walked into the pawn shop. That night, Alina did not sleep in the empty house. She checked her mother into a suite at the Citizen Hotel downtown, ordered dinner up to the room, drew a hot bath for Rosa, and sat on the edge of the tub while her mother soaked, the way Rosa had once sat on the edge of the tub when Alina was 5 and afraid of the drain. Rosa fell asleep before 9, curled on her side under a clean white duvet, the small vinyl purse on the nightstand beside her, the wedding ring back on her finger where it belonged. Elena watched her mother sleep for a long time. Rosa's face, in sleep, looked younger. The tension around her mouth relaxed. Her breathing slowed and evened out. It occurred to Elena that she could not remember the last time her mother had slept somewhere she felt truly safe. Elena moved quietly into the sitting area of the suite. She opened her laptop. She began pulling up 7 years of wire transfer records from her 3 primary banks. She exported them into a single spreadsheet. She sorted them by date. She sorted them by amount. She sorted them by recipient account. She began to build a picture. It was a picture she did not want to see, and she made herself see it anyway. At 2 in the morning, she made a fresh pot of coffee from the room service tray. At 3:30, she opened a second spreadsheet. This one she titled simply Marco. At 4:15, she made her first phone call to Zurich. Her fiancé Daniel answered on the first ring, which meant he had been awake, which meant he had been worried. Elena had not called him since the plane landed. "Elena, are you all right?" She looked at herself in the dark window of the suite at the reflection of a woman who had cried her makeup off hours ago and had not bothered to fix it. "No, but I will be. I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to pull the corporate audit team, the one we used for the Rothstein acquisition. I need 2 forensic accountants on a plane to Sacramento by tomorrow evening. Tell them it's personal. Tell them I'll pay double. Tell them to bring everything they need to trace 7 years of wire transfers through multiple accounts." Daniel was quiet for a moment. She could hear him already typing on his laptop. "Elena, is it your mother? It's my mother and it's my brother and it's about $150,000 I thought was a mortgage." Another pause. Then softly, "I'm so sorry, love." "Don't be sorry yet, just make the calls." "Do you want me to fly out?" Elena closed her eyes. "Not yet. I need to do the first part of this alone, but I want you here for the second part. Whenever you say the word." She thanked him and ended the call. At 6 in the morning, she made coffee in the room's small kitchenette and sat by the window watching Sacramento wake up. At 7:30, Rosa stirred in the bedroom. Elena brought her a cup of café con leche the way Rosa had made it every morning of Elena's childhood: 3/4 milk, 1/4 coffee, 2 spoonfuls of sugar. Rosa took the cup with both hands and sipped slowly. "Mija, where are we?" "The Citizen Hotel, downtown. Do you remember?" Rosa nodded slowly. "I remember. It's beautiful here." "It is." "Elena, what happens today?" Elena sat down on the edge of the bed. "Today my lawyer arrives. Tomorrow 2 accountants arrive. And then sometime in the next few days I'm going to see Marco. But I need you to stay here at the hotel safe until I say it's time. Can you do that for me?" Rosa looked into her coffee. "He's going to be so angry." "Yes. He's going to say terrible things about me. Probably." "Elena," Rosa looked up. Her eyes were clearer than they had been the day before. Some small, essential piece of her had begun to return. "Are you sure you want to know all of it? Some things, once you know them, you can't unknow." Elena reached out and touched her mother's cheek. "Mom, I've been unknowing things for 7 years. It's why we're here." Priya Anand arrived at 9 sharp, a small, sharp-eyed woman in a navy suit carrying a leather portfolio and 2 large cups of coffee. She took one look at Elena and said, "You didn't sleep?" "No." "Good. Neither did I. I've been reading your text messages on the flight." Priya sat down at the desk and opened her portfolio. She pulled out a legal pad already covered in notes. "Talk to me. Everything you didn't put in the text." Elena talked for 2 hours. She told Priya about the pawn shop, about the ring, about the empty house, about the 5 years of missing money, about her mother's whispered sometimes in the car. She showed Priya the spreadsheet from the night before. Priya listened without interrupting, her pen moving steadily across the legal pad, her face professional and blank. When Elena finally stopped talking, Priya set down her pen. "Elena, I have to ask you the question I'm required to ask you before we go any further. What is your goal here? Not what you want to happen to Marco. What do you want for your mother?" Elena had been thinking about that question all night. "I want 3 things. I want her safe. I want her home fixed in her name only, protected in a trust she controls. And I want her to never worry about money for the rest of her life. And Marco." Elena was silent for a long moment. She thought of Marco at 10 years old, teaching her how to ride a bike. Marco at 15, taking a job at the grocery store so their mother could stop working double shifts. Marco at their father's funeral, holding Rosa upright when her legs would not hold her. "I want the truth," Elena said finally. "I want him to see it, and then I want him to make a choice." The forensic accountants arrived the following evening. Two men in their 40s, quiet, methodical, the kind of professionals who did not ask personal questions and did not need to. They took over the sitting room of Elena's suite, set up 2 laptops and a small portable printer, and began the slow, patient work of tracing 7 years of money through the shell of Marco's small construction company, through 2 personal checking accounts, through a joint account he had opened in Rosa's name without her knowledge, and through a series of cash withdrawals at casinos in Reno and Lake Tahoe. By the end of the second day, they had a spreadsheet that ran to 14 pages. By the end of the third day, they had a narrative. Marco had not simply stolen the money. He had drowned in it. Every gambling loss had led to a bigger transfer. Every bigger transfer had led to a bigger gambling loss. Somewhere around the 4-year mark, the pattern had shifted from theft into something closer to addiction feeding itself. Priya read the report twice. Then she looked up at Elena. "This is not a criminal case I would recommend you pursue, not because it isn't one, it is, but because the process would take 3 years, cost you $100,000 in legal fees, and put your mother on a witness stand. There is a better way. Tell me." You confront him with the evidence. You give him one path forward. He signs over any claim to the house. He agrees to a monitored repayment plan. He agrees to gambling addiction treatment. He agrees to have no financial contact with your mother ever again. In exchange, you don't file criminal charges. You don't publish this report. You give him the chance to become the brother your mother believes he still is, somewhere underneath all of this. Elena thought about it for a long time. Then she nodded. Set the meeting. The meeting took place in a small conference room at Priya's associate firm downtown 3 days later. Marco arrived 20 minutes late wearing a work jacket and jeans stained with drywall dust. He had aged more than Elena expected. His hair was thinner, his face was heavier. When he saw her sitting at the head of the conference table, his expression shifted through 3 things in about 2 seconds: surprise, then relief. Then, when he saw Priya sitting to Elena's right and the 2 accountants sitting across from her with their laptops open, fear. He sat down slowly. "Elena, you didn't tell me you were flying home." "I know. Where's Mom?" "Safe." He blinked. He looked at the 2 accountants. He looked at Priya. He looked back at Elena. "What is this?" Elena slid the 14-page report across the table. She did not say anything. Marco stared at it. He did not pick it up. His jaw tightened. His eyes moved to the top page and stayed there for a long time. Elena watched him. She watched the exact moment his face changed from the face of a man preparing an excuse to the face of a man realizing there was no excuse left to prepare. He put his hands flat on the table. He looked down at them. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet she almost could not hear it. "How is she?" It was not the question she had expected. She had expected denial, anger, blame, not that. "She pawned her wedding ring for $45, Marco. She lives in one corner of the empty living room. She cleans houses 2 mornings a week to buy insulin. That's how she is." Marco closed his eyes. A tremor ran through his shoulders. He did not cry, but something in him gave way, the way a wall gives way, not all at once, but in a slow, sagging surrender. "I was going to fix it." "When?" "I don't know. When I want it back, when I could pay it back. When Marco." He stopped. She let the silence sit between them for a long moment. "Marco, do you know what she told me when I asked her if she was afraid of you?" He shook his head. He could not speak. "She said sometimes." He put his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. Priya, without looking at him, slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was the agreement. The terms Elena had chosen. The house in Rosa's name protected in a trust. Restitution on a monitored schedule. Court-ordered gambling addiction treatment. No financial contact with Rosa ever again. In exchange, no criminal charges. Marco stared at the agreement for a long time. He read every line. His hands were shaking so badly that when he finally picked up the pen, he had to steady his right wrist with his left hand to sign his name. When he was done, he set the pen down very carefully, as though it were something fragile. He looked across the table at Elena. His eyes were red, but his voice was steadier than she expected. "Can I see her?" Alina had known this question was coming. She had thought about it for days. She thought about it now one more time before she answered. Not yet, maybe someday, but that will be her decision, not mine. When she is ready, if she is ever ready, she will tell me, and I will tell you. Marco nodded slowly. He did not argue. Somewhere inside him, the part of him that had spent 5 years pretending seemed to have finally exhausted itself. He stood up. He walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. Without turning around, he said, "Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I know that doesn't fix anything, but tell her anyway." Then he opened the door and walked out. Alina did not tell Rosa about the meeting for a week. She waited until her mother was stronger. Until Rosa had slept 8 full nights in the hotel suite, until she had gained back a few of the pounds she had lost, until color had returned to her cheeks. Then, on a quiet Sunday morning, over Café Con Leche on the balcony overlooking the river, Alina told her everything. Rosa listened without interrupting. When Alina was done, Rosa was quiet for a long time. She watched the light move on the water below. Then she said, "He was a good boy once, Alina." "Do you remember?" "I remember. The gambling." Rosa shook her head slowly. "I did not know it had become a sickness. I thought he was just weak. I was too hard on him about it. Maybe if I had understood, if I had gotten him help sooner." "Mom, stop." Alina reached across the small table and took her mother's hand. "This was not your fault. What he did to you was not your fault. And what happens to him now is not your responsibility. You raised 2 children the best you could. What we do with what you gave us is on us, not on you." Rosa's eyes filled. She did not wipe the tears away, she just let them fall. "I hope he gets better, Mija. I know you do. That is the last thing I will say about it." And it was. The yellow house on Magnolia Street was restored over the following 4 months, not renovated, not modernized, restored. Alina hired a small local crew and gave them one instruction: make it the way it was in 1988. The year before Alina's father died. The year Rosa had been happiest. They painted the exterior the same soft yellow. They fixed the 3rd porch step. They replaced the missing spindles. They planted a new palm tree next to the surviving one. Inside, Alina tracked down as much of the original furniture as she could. Marco had sold the couch to a family in Elk Grove who agreed to sell it back. The coffee table her father had built had ended up at a consignment shop and was still there. The bookshelves came home from a yard sale in Rancho Cordova. Alina refilled them with Rosa's old books, the ones Rosa had given away over the years to church rummage sales, tracked down one at a time on used book websites. On the day Rosa moved back in, she stood in the doorway for a long time and simply looked. Then she walked slowly through every room, touching things. The ceramic rooster on the windowsill. The yellow curtains, which Alina had washed and rehung. The little wooden crucifix above her bed that Rosa had thought was lost. In the living room on the coffee table, Alina had placed a small velvet box. Rosa opened it. Inside was the thin gold wedding ring resting on white silk. It had been professionally cleaned and reset. It shone like new. Rosa slid it back onto her finger, over the soft groove where it belonged, and she pressed her palm to her chest, over her heart, and she smiled. It was the first real smile Alina had seen from her in 7 years. If this story reminded you of someone you love, maybe don't wait. Send the message. Book the flight. Pick up the phone. Because sometimes the people who raised us aren't asking for money or grand gestures. Sometimes they're just holding on, quietly hoping we come home in time. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this one.